Hi, how are you? Good, I'm glad to hear it. I'm Steve Taylor-Knowles, and I'm here to talk about transferable skills across the domains of study, work and life. And it's rooted in work that I did producing this series of mine. It's on the Macmillan stand. I'll be floating around. This isn't going to be a commercial thing. I just want you to know that what I'm talking about is rooted in the work we did on this series. There's a brochure for you to pick up on the way out if you want to know more about that series, and I'll be on the Macmillan stand talking about that. That's the end of the commercial bit. Young adults and older teenagers who are approximately 18 to 25, which means that right now they were born between about 88 and 95, maybe 96. And if you look at the terms for this generation, you start to get a handle on what the world looks like from their point of view. You'll see some of these terms in use. Generation Y, obviously the generation that follows on from Generation X. Echo boomers. This is a reference to the fact that in America, at least, and Europe, there was a kind of mini baby boom, similar to the post-war baby boom around this time. The millennials, obviously that generation whose coming of age or whose childhood included the change of the millennium. Generation Next is a play on Generation X. The Net generation. I'm not a big believer in the idea of digital natives and digital immigrants. I think it's far more to do with individual need. But they are a generation who've grown up with the internet as a constant backdrop to their lives. And that has various consequences. Generation 9/11, for obvious reasons, that's the geopolitical backdrop that they've grown up against. What do you think Boomerang generation might be? The Boomerang generation is that generation who grow up and mum and dad throw them out of the house and then they come back to live with mum and dad like a boomerang. You can't get rid of them. I'm not saying I endorse these terms, I'm just saying these are terms that you can see. And connected to that, this is I don't know if anybody in here is Japanese or spent time in Japan. I haven't, but I came across this term, which is a Japanese pronunciation of English words. Parasite or shinguru. Parasite singles. The single young adults who live on mum and dad like a parasite. Peter Pan generation. And Peter Pan was the boy who never grew up, but that's not exactly the reference here. It's a reference to the fact that the key milestones in life are delayed. So getting married happens later, having children happens later, settling down to a career happens later. You know, in the UK, within the last 10 years or so, the average age of becoming a parent, both the mother and the father, they both increased by about 2 years. For men, it's gone from about 31 to 33, and for women, it's gone from about 27 to 29. So the key milestones are happening later. The 700 euro generation, any idea what that is? The 700 euro generation. Minimum wage in Spain. I think in France it's 1,000 euros, and they have another term, the 1,000 euro generation. A generation that can expect to spend some time earning the minimum wage. A precarious generation, particularly financially precarious, insecure. And Generation Flux, again, it's a kind of play on Generation X, a generation that's facing a time of particular change. So those are the kind of things that I want you to have in the background of your mind as we look at to what extent the needs of this generation are being met by education, particularly English education. There was a survey last year by Telefonica, the telecommunications company. They did a global millennial survey. And they found that 63% say it's difficult for their generation to progress from school to the workplace environment. What is education for? What is driving the learning of English? If your students are learning English in order to go and sit on the banks of the River Avon in England and read Shakespeare, then you're very lucky and that's fantastic. But that is not the reason why most students are learning English. They're learning English because they will get a job, they'll get a better job, and over their lifetime they will earn more money. That is what is driving English education. Have you heard of Freakonomics? Some of you maybe have. It was two economists. Stephen Leavitt was one, I forget the name of the other, and they produced a book called Freakonomics, where they looked at everyday life using some of the tools of economics and got some interesting insights that way. For example, one of them was their most famous insight, or suggested explanation maybe, was that in America in the 80s, the late 80s, the biggest problem was urban crime. Crime was rising, nobody had any idea what to do, and then it started to fall off in the early 90s. Crime started to fall, and so of course all the politicians took credit. They said this is because of the laws we've implemented, or because of this campaign or that campaign. And they said, actually, do you know why crime is falling? It's because you legalized abortion in 1974 in America, and lots of kids who would have been criminals were not born. So they kind of look at life from a slightly odd stance, which is very interesting. So I would recommend that book, Freakonomics. And they do a podcast. And on this podcast recently, they were talking about what is the financial value of learning a foreign language. The answer is, if you're American, learning a foreign language in America, forget it. You will earn an extra 1 to 2% over your whole career through knowing a foreign language. But if you live in other countries, and this was a study done in Russia, Turkey and Israel, and the foreign language you learn is English, then you can expect a 10 to 20% financial boost over the course of your career. I think that is being undermined because everybody speaks English now. And so the thing that makes students stand out now is all this other area of their transferable skills. That's the argument I want to make today. I want to look at the way in which education prepares students for the world outside the classroom, particularly the world of work. And it seems like there's quite a disjuncture between what students get from education and what employers want. And I want to look at this key young adult transition point of leaving education and entering the workplace. This question of how employable are today's graduates. From lots of directions, you keep getting the answer that employers are unhappy with different aspects of what students leave education with. This was a survey by Grad Direct a few years ago. The percentage of employers that rated these things as important, the right academic qualifications, only 27% rated the right academic qualifications as important. 42% said the ability to appreciate an alternative point of view. 62% communication and teamwork. 68% the ability to grasp complex information. There's a whole set of stuff that employers value much more highly than the technical skills and technical knowledge that students acquire from the subject they have studied. This was another one from the Association of Graduate Recruiters. 55% of employers felt that graduates lack soft skills. They couldn't manage their own learning, they can't solve problems, they're not motivated. Again and again you see the same stuff coming through. I read this morning in the Times, I was reading the Times app on my phone this morning. The British Chamber of Commerce is having their annual conference right now. And let me just read to you what they said. They highlighted exactly this kind of problem, and I don't know if you've seen Dragon's Den, but one of the guys on there, Theo Paphitis, said, everybody says we must get our kids into university to get a highly paid job. The world has changed. You won't be entitled to a highly paid job just because you went to university. Skills are crucial now. I want to share with you a little excerpt from a podcast that I came across from the University of Warwick, my alma mater. Professors Kate Costain and Peter Elias from the Institute of Employment Research. I'm just going to play you a few minutes of what they say in answer to this question: how employable are today's graduates? And I just want you to kind of compare it to what I was saying.
What do you think it was really looking for when they advertised graduate jobs?
What they're looking for is self-motivated, smart, intelligent, well-presented, on the kind of usual points that an employer would make when they talk about the graduate or why it is that they can't find the graduates that they need nowadays. They want the skills, obviously, and if you're an engineering firm, you're recruiting engineers, you want to engineers, if you're a hospital, you're recruiting medical staff, you want to test newly qualified doctors and so on. So typically, there's a mix then of the substantive skills that you've picked up on your course, which is subject related. But that only accounts for about 15 to 20% of all graduates. And so for the rest, you have to say, well, what are graduates, what are their friends looking for? I would think, above all, looking for a keen, motivated person who they feel will add value to their organisation.
Well, very often, sadly, they're looking for people like them, and that's been a problem for students who don't fit the bill in terms of having the networks to enable them to get on at the bottom rung of recruitment processes. I think also there's a huge confusion between skills and personality attributes, and very often the things that the employers call soft skills are not skills that are developed in university, they're skills that are developed within the process of socialization. What we are finding is that the people who are most likely to get the good jobs are people who start out socially advantaged, they have advantaged higher education, and it's becoming increasingly the case that those excluded from those networks find it difficult to find the jobs that they want.
But which graduate skills do you think really count?
I think that's an unanswerable question.
It depends on the job.
It depends, and it depends on the student. I mean, it depends on the student looking for a job. There is such diversity in the graduate labour market that for us to pronounce, well, this is what we need above all else would be stupid.
There's no agreement about what graduate skills are. They're different for different types of graduates. But a long time ago, probably about 10 years ago, somebody did some research among employers to find out what employers thought they were looking for when they were recruiting graduates. And what they ended up concluding is that employers are looking for people who are flexible, who are adaptable. That's the key thing. They think that people who have, I suppose, been trained to handle information, to manage processes, and have provided the evidence that they're capable of problem solving sufficiently well to get a good degree. Because getting a degree is partly about sussing out what you need to do in order to deliver what your lecturers, what people necessarily expect. Then that gives them some kind of confidence that these people will be able to adapt to situations that happen in the workplace, learn on the job, do what's required in the organisation. And I think that probably is the key skill. But it's a key skill that employers are looking for in almost any skill, any job that requires people to make decisions and discriminate and not simply follow instructions.
And one of the, I think that's their take on it is very interesting. They mentioned a statistic, 15 to 20%. Did you understand what that was referring to? They said that 15 to 20% of graduates get a job based on the subject they have studied. That means 80% to 85% of graduates are getting a job based on something else. They've done a French degree, they've done a chemistry degree, but they're not working with French or chemistry, they're getting it based on their life skills. They use the term soft skills. The University of Kent did a meta-study. They looked at various surveys of employers and they brought them all together and did a kind of literature review to decide what the top 10 skills that employers want are. So they mentioned some of them. What would you imagine is on this list? Problem solving. You'd expect to see problem solving skills. Communication skills. Flexibility they mentioned. Adaptability. I don't think these are in order. This is just the top 10. Look how central verbal and written communication are. Teamwork. That's still communication. Commercial awareness is a kind of business sense, obviously. Critical thinking skills, analysing and investigating, motivation, drive, flexibility, managing your time. They also highlighted other areas like these: decision making, literacy, numeracy. I'm going to come back to show you specific examples of how you integrate this stuff into your classroom. And I'm going to be talking about critical thinking and decision making in particular. Why? Why do employers bemoan the lack of these skills in their job applicants? The reason is, I think, because technical skills are easy to teach. If I want you to work in my company that sells and manufactures shoes, I can teach you how to make shoes. I can't teach you to be confident. I can't teach you to work well in teams. That, like the female Professor Purcell said in the audio, that's part of the socialization process that has to start so much earlier. I can't teach these as an employer. There was this was something in America, the Seattle Jobs Initiative last year. And they did similar surveys of employers. 60% thought that these soft skills were as important as technical skills, and another 17% thought they were more important. That's over 3/4 said they were as important as or more important than the technical knowledge. And the kind of areas that they were looking at were things like communication, problem solving, reliability, self-direction, teamwork. The professors on the University of Wales said there's no definitive list, but you see the same themes coming up again and again. Here's another one from the UK. This is from the UK Commission for Employment and Skills Report for this year. The skills lacking among job applicants. Of course, number one, the technical skills. You might expect that. But then look down the list. Communication, problem solving, literacy, communication. Foreign language skills are down there. If this was a country other than the UK, they might have been given a higher priority. It so revolves around communication and interpersonal skills. I want to call this area life skills. And I want to share with you a couple of definitions that I've come across that I think highlight some of the aspects of life skills that I want to draw out. This is from the World Health Organization. Life skills education is designed to facilitate the practice and reinforcement of psychosocial skills in a culturally and developmentally appropriate way. It contributes to the promotion of personal and social development, prevention of health and social problems, and the protection of human rights. You can see from that what a holistic concept it is. This is my favourite definition from the UNESCO Institute for Education. It is evident that in addition to practical and vocational skills, Other types of skills, such as social, individual, and, I like this term, reflective skills, are also needed. Life skills programs emphasize abilities that help to facilitate communication, negotiation, to think critically and solve problems and make independent decisions. So, in working on the materials that I've been working on, we use this key concept that life skills are the key skills you need to be effective in your work life, your academic life, and your... There's a slight problem in English. I want to say social life, but social life sounds like it's going out for a coffee with your friends down the cafe. In fact, I mean more like your life as a member of your local community. I do mean your interaction with your friends socially, but I also mean your life as a member of society, as a member of your local community, as a global citizen. Perhaps you could use the term societal life, perhaps in English, although nobody would understand what you were talking about. So we're stuck with kind of social life. Because these young people need to be prepared for flexible careers. My wife's grandmother is still alive. She's 90, she'll be 95 this year. And she recently moved into a smaller apartment. So my wife inherited lots of photos. And we were going through these photos. And in amongst them were a couple of leather folders. And in there were photos and presentation material from her grandfather. Her grandfather, when he eventually retired, he was quite a senior manager in Lucas Aerospace, the engineering firm. The first leather folder was him and dozens of other people getting their 25 years service award. The second one was him and dozens of other people, men, actually all of them, getting their 40 years service award. Very few of you, if any, and none of this generation will get awards for 40 years service with the same company. You're lucky if you spend 40 years in the same profession. Careers have become far more flexible and people need transferable skills that go from job to job, company to company, career to career. Young people need to develop autonomy and responsibility for their own learning, their sense of themselves as lifelong learners. And they need to express themselves and find fulfillment in an increasingly connected global social world. I showed you something from the Telefonica Millennial Survey. Another finding from that survey was that this generation are particularly disconnected from traditional political processes, traditional political parties and traditional political ideologies. Language is a life skill. What I mean by that is that, of course, students need all the language work that we have been doing with them. They need a solid grounding in grammar, a good range of vocabulary, the language skills, pronunciation. But I want to open out their language into these other areas, into their problem-solving skills, developing their organizational skills. This is just, as I said, there's no one way of cutting up this area, but I thought this graphic was an interesting approach where you've got the top level skills in the middle, then breaking them down into more manageable skills, and then around the outside, teachable and learnable chunks. I want to deal with an objection that may be going through the minds of some of you, which is that I teach English, I'm an English teacher, why are you telling me all this stuff about life skills? Are you expecting me to somehow, is this an extra burden on my teaching? I teach grammar and vocabulary, why do I have to start teaching all this other stuff? I think there's a responsibility on every classroom to start introducing or to continue and develop their use of all this stuff. Every maths classroom, every history classroom, every physics classroom should be developing all this stuff. But I think as English teachers we have a particular responsibility, and I've got four main reasons, four main responses to this objection. first is, English alone is no longer enough. Everybody in the world speaks English today. More. When I was small, when I was 4 years old, I was quite a bright kid at school. When I was 4, the headmistress said to my mum, Steve will go to university. At that point, 4% of the population went to university in the UK. By the time I actually went to university, it was more like 20%. Today, it's more like 40 to 50%, and for women, it's just over 50%. Being a graduate no longer marks you out as different, it just gets you in the game. And I think learning English and speaking English has become the same kind of thing. I agree with David Gradoff when he said that as English becomes more generally available, little or no competitive advantage is gained by adopting it. Rather, it has become a new baseline. Without it, you're not even in the race. So we do our students a disservice if we merely teach them English. In order to maximize their potential, there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we need to be giving them. The second reason I think we have a particular responsibility in English language classrooms is because communication skills are at the heart of the whole thing. Written communication, verbal, teamwork, negotiation. A lot of it is about interpersonal communication. And our aim in our English language classrooms is surely to produce better communicators. A number of these life skills are culturally and linguistically dependent. Exactly how you do them in English differs from L1. Exactly how you do them in an international business setting, for example, differs from how you might do it in within a single national setting. So students need to develop their cultural awareness, and they need to develop specific ways of doing things in English. Finally, it's not rocket science. It's the expertise that you all already possess as fully functioning members of society, which most of you look like you are. Fully functioning adult members of society. It's not rocket science. It's what you already bring to the classroom. Some of you may have seen this. I've been showing people this for the last year. 2002, Newsweek produced a special edition, The World in 2012, their prediction of what the world was going to be like in 10 years' time. And I kept this magazine because I knew in 10 years' time I'd get 10 minutes of material out of it talking to you. Because there's one very interesting aspect of it. One was they predicted that Europe would be an economic powerhouse. Yeah, and, you know, maybe up until about 2008, but they kind of got that wrong. But look at this, emerging technologies. They said that by 2005, electronic banking replaces cash in developed countries. I'll give them half marks. I do a lot of internet banking. I also carry cash. 2008, holistic healthcare gains widespread acceptance. I've got no idea personally whether that's true. Speaking to other people doing this talk, they've told me it's not. A majority of people use PDAs. Yeah, except we call them iPhones. But they kind of, how quaint the term PDA seems now. But look at this. 2010, translation software replaces foreign language teachers. Translation software replaces foreign language teachers in 2010. So you're all 4 years past your sell-by date. What are you still doing here? This was the reason I kept this magazine, because I knew this was complete and utter nonsense. Actually, is it complete and utter nonsense? There is a peripheral threat from automation, from software, from Google Translate, from Facebook Translate. I didn't see David Gradoff's plenary this morning, but I did see him speak in Bristol a couple of weeks ago. He mentioned something that I thought was interesting. The Beijing Olympics, did he mention that this morning? No. The Beijing Olympics. Thousands of taxi drivers, none of whom speak English. Tens of thousands of tourists, all of whom want to speak English. So what do? Teach the taxi drivers English? No. That's hard work and expensive. So what you do is you put a machine in each taxi that speaks English to the customer. So you get in the taxi, give the driver a piece of paper, he taps a few buttons, and the machine says, hello, welcome to the taxi, there is this, have a nice day. How many teachers lost out on potential kind of private lesson income from that decision? Right? There is, and how often, I do this myself, how often do I click on translate on Facebook when I see a post from somebody writing in Italian or Russian or something? Because I'm not going to learn Italian or Russian for that reason, you know. So there is a peripheral threat from automation, machines, robots. But centrally, you bring to the classroom your life skills as a fully functioning member of society. Now, we all have strengths and weaknesses. Some of us need to work on our time management, some of us need to work on our confidence, but we come to them as human beings with strengths and weaknesses, and we need to try and develop and share with our students that process of development. All right, I'm going to go on to some practical examples of how you introduce it into your classroom, because I don't want to make it sound like it's a whole extra burden. In fact, I think it's more of a refocusing of the outcome of the work you're doing in your lesson. I've got here, my target skill is evaluating different plans. That's a key part of decision making. And the context is, I'm working with a pre-intermediate, maybe an intermediate group. And the kind of grammar we've been doing recently, we've been doing modals of possibility prediction, may, might, could, will. And we've been doing will versus going to. Probably at this level, we've been revising this stuff. So I want to combine a linguistic outcome with a life skills outcome. The topic, in terms of topic, in class we've been doing living in the city versus living in the country, some area like that. So what I want to do is break it down for them into learnable steps and then design a task sequence that takes them through those steps. And as much as possible, I want to give them concrete tools that they can take away from the classroom and apply to their lives. I'm going to teach them, and I'm going to teach you, how to use a decision matrix, a concrete tool for making better, objective decisions. Because when it comes to evaluating plans, if we've got 3 plans that we've seen, what we could do is choose the one that we prefer and then fight about it, or argue, or try to convince each other. But how can we put it on a more objective footing? How can we help our students become better at making more objective decisions while at the same time consolidating their language? So the 3 steps I've broken it down into are: establish which factors are important, evaluate how each plan affects the factors, and then rank the plans. So I'm going to ask my students, first of all, what's important to people in your city? And I've given them 8 possibilities, and I want them to choose 4. In groups, it doesn't matter what they choose, it's about going through the process. So, we've got new jobs, places to enjoy nature, good roads, cheap housing, good schools, clean air, good transportation, and places to shop. Let's suppose our students decide that for people in their city, jobs, cheap housing, clean air, places to shop are the important factors. Each group can choose different ones, it doesn't matter. Now, here's the scenario I'm going to give my students. Your town or city government is considering 3 development plans for the green area in the picture. Read the information about each plan. So we've got 3 plans. Here's plan A. Under this proposal, the government is planning to use this area for urban development. They're going to build a large number of new houses, a as well as other facilities such as schools and a shopping mall. They're also going to create more roads and provide public transportation to the area. They'll allow a few companies to build facilities near the new development. So this is Plan A, urban development. Essentially, urban sprawl, another piece of city. Right? Plan B, under this plan, they're going to build a large park. They're going to clean up the area and provide facilities such as picnic tables, barbecues, and a playground. And they're going to build new roads to the park, but they won't allow the construction of houses, schools, or stores. Let's call this plan the large park. Okay, so Plan A, urban development. Plan B, they're going to build a large park. And Plan C, this plan will allow the government to sell the green area to private developers. The developers want to build a small number of large, expensive houses. They're going to build new streets and a small park, exclusively for residents, and the city government is going to provide a bus service to the area for people who work in the houses. Let's call that private development plan. I like the sound of a nice big park. Yeah. Maybe you prefer the private development. How can we actually make the decision a bit more objective? This is a decision matrix. Students have to write in the 4 factors they've chosen: jobs, cheap housing, clean air, places to shop. And then they look at each plan and evaluate it according to how that plan will affect each factor. And they give it a score from -2 to +2. -2, very negative effect, +2, very positive effect. So, if we look at Plan A, how do you think that's going to affect new jobs? What score do you want to give that? Let's see if we agree. The precise numbers don't matter. The precise numbers your students come up with don't matter. It's about going through the process. But let's see if we agree on how do you think this urban development will affect new jobs? +2, I agree. It's going to have clearly a positive effect on new jobs. Clean air? I decided -2 because it's urban sprawl. Cheap housing? Well, a large number of new houses. Large number sounds possibly cheap. New houses sound possibly a bit more expensive. So let's give it a +1. Places to shop. They're going to build a new shopping mall. So +2. Okay? So then I put my scores for Plan A in my matrix. And I go through the same process for Plan B. This is the building the park. Perhaps a new. Now, what language are my students using all the time they're doing with this? Remember, the target language was will, going to, and models of possibility prediction. So, all the time they're going through this task, they're saying things to each other like, this might have this effect. Do you think this will happen? No, that's not going to happen. Using the target language, a linguistic outcome, at the same time as a life skills outcome. It's not in addition to this, it's alongside. Building a big park, okay, it's going to have a good positive effect on clean air. The houses around the park are probably going to become more expensive, so a negative effect. No effect on places to shop. I'm going to whiz through this because I've got another example to show. So, we get the marks for Plan B, we go through the same process for Plan C, and then when we add them up, far more objectively, we have decided together that Plan A is, for the people in our area, the preferable plan. So this decision matrix, you can then take and use in any area of your life where you have to make a plan, make a decision that affects multiple factors. A concrete tool, a concrete life skills tool, and solid language practice. One more example to show of the same kind of thing, well, the same kind of principle. Critical thinking. Critical thinking, for me, boils down to arguments. Recognizing an argument when you see it. Understanding how other people's arguments are put together and interrogating the argument. Putting your own arguments together with supporting details and examples. A lot of critical thinking to me seems to revolve around arguments. And one of the key aspects of arguments is assumptions, the assumptions behind an argument. So I want my students to get some way towards analysing assumptions. One thing I could do is give them a written text and ask them what are the righteous assumptions. That's fine, but I want to work up to that. What kind of baby steps can I take before that to raise their awareness of different aspects? I would recommend this book, by the way, Stella Cottrell's Critical Thinking Skills. She said in that, in critical thinking, assumptions refers to anything that is taken for granted in the presentation of an argument. These may be facts, ideas, or beliefs that are not stated explicitly, but which underlie the argument. Without them, the same conclusion would not be possible. Here's my context. Intermediate, maybe upper intermediate, and we've been studying present deductions. Must be, might be, could be, can't. This is key problem-solving language. Must be, might be, could be, can't. This is in the books. This is in the context of a unit about logical thinking. So it's all about kind of problem-solving from a logical thinking point of view. And I want to give them a puzzle to do together. Some of you may have seen this puzzle. If you have, don't shout out the answer. We've just got 5 minutes to attend to this. Here are the instructions. You've got 9 dots in 3 rows of 3. Here are the instructions. Connect these dots by drawing 4 straight lines without lifting your pencil off the paper and without going back over a line. Has anybody seen this before? You've seen this before. Do you remember the answer? Okay. All right. Now, what you will do in attempting this puzzle is you will go 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no, that's 5. It doesn't work. Okay, I'll try this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh no, that's 5. That doesn't work. So you go through this with your students, and your students, in doing this activity together, what's the language they're using? They're saying, that can't be right. No, this must be the first dot. So they're using the language, my target language, but I want to raise their awareness of assumptions, because the thing that prevents them from finding the right answer is their assumption. So I get my students to question their assumptions. First one, the instructions say each line has to start and end on a dot. False. The instructions don't say that, but probably you are assuming that. Secondly, your lines can go further than the rows of dots. That's true, but you are probably assuming it's false. This is why you're stuck. Each line has to go through 3 dots. That's false. The instructions don't say that, but you are probably assuming it's true. So I'm raising my students' awareness of assumptions, questioning their assumptions, and then maybe they break through and think outside the box and figure out the answer, which, does anybody remember the answer? Do you remember the answer?
You have to go down.
Like that? Then what?
One. And use it up.
Yeah, okay. You've got to literally go, you've got to go outside the box. You can only solve this if you question the assumptions. Question your assumptions. So I'm raising my students in a fun activity kind of way. I'm practicing the target language, and I'm raising their awareness about assumptions. Then I would move on to something more textual. Advertisements. Advertisements are great for analysing what the assumptions are behind it, the assumptions about you as a consumer. So, and they're text light. So I would start with advertisements and then move on to something that's more paragraph-based. Right, I've almost finished. Let me just summarise for the last 30 seconds. I think we have a responsibility to introduce this whole area of life skills into our classrooms, particularly as English language teachers. I think the best way to do it is not to see it as an extra burden on our teaching, but to see it as a refocusing and one of the outcomes of our teaching. It's at the heart, 10 seconds of commercial pitch, it's at the heart of the materials I've been working on. Take a leaflet, have a look, take a booklet, have a look, and I'll be around all day, and I'm on the Macmillan stand at various times. If you're interested, come and speak to me. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Oh, I should just mention, that's my professional Facebook page. If you go along there and like me, then we can be in touch. If you use my materials and you want to ask me questions or anything, then that's the best way to contact me.